The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her simple fatigues and walked toward the briefing room. At 34, she had learned to blend into crowds, to let others underestimate her. It was a skill that had served her well throughout her military career, though few knew the true extent of her achievements. Sarah had grown up in a small farming town in Iowa, where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother taught elementary school. The idea of joining the military had never crossed her mind until a recruiter visited her high school during her senior year. She was captain of the debate team, valedictorian of her class, and had been accepted to several prestigious universities. But something about the recruiter's words about service and purpose resonated deep within her. Her parents were initially hesitant when she announced her intention to join the Navy instead of pursuing her full scholarship to Stanford. Her father, a veteran himself, understood the call to serve, but her mother worried about the dangers their daughter would face. They eventually supported her decision, though they never could have imagined where that choice would lead. Basic training had been challenging, but Sarah thrived in the structured environment. Her drill instructors quickly noticed her natural leadership abilities and her uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure. She excelled in every aspect of training, from physical fitness to tactical planning. Her fellow recruits looked up to her, often seeking her guidance during difficult exercises. After basic training, Sarah was selected for officer candidate school, where she continued to distinguish herself. Her instructors noted her exceptional analytical skills and her ability to think strategically under pressure. She graduated at the top of her class and was commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. Her first assignment was aboard a destroyer in the Pacific Fleet. The ship's captain, a gruff man named Captain Reynolds, initially questioned whether a young woman fresh out of officer training could handle the responsibilities of a naval officer. However, Sarah quickly proved herself during a crisis when the ship's communications system failed during a joint exercise. She improvised a solution using backup equipment and established communications with the fleet, potentially preventing a dangerous collision between two vessels. Captain Reynolds called her into his office the next day. He looked at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Ensign Mitchell," he said, "I've been in the Navy for 23 years, and I've rarely seen someone handle pressure the way you did yesterday. Have you ever considered special operations?" The suggestion caught Sarah off guard. She had heard whispers about the Navy's elite units, but she had never seriously considered that path for herself. Captain Reynolds explained that he had connections with people who recruited for special programs, and he believed she had the potential to excel in that environment. Over the next few months, Sarah found herself being evaluated by various officers who seemed to appear and disappear without explanation. They would observe her during routine duties, ask seemingly casual questions about her background and motivations, and occasionally present her with hypothetical scenarios to test her problem-solving abilities. The evaluations culminated in a meeting with a stern-faced commander who identified himself only as Commander Thompson. He sat across from her in a windowless room and studied her file for several minutes before speaking. "Ensign Mitchell," he began, "your record is impressive, but what we're discussing goes far beyond normal naval service. The program I'm referring to requires complete dedication, absolute secrecy, and the willingness to undertake missions that most people couldn't even imagine. Are you interested in learning more?" Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. She had always been drawn to challenges, and something about Commander Thompson's words excited her. "Yes, sir," she replied simply. What followed was the most intensive training Sarah had ever experienced. She was sent to a classified location where she underwent months of preparation in advanced combat techniques, intelligence gathering, psychological operations, and strategic planning. The instructors were unlike any military personnel she had previously encountered. They moved with a precision and confidence that spoke of extensive real-world experience. The physical demands of the training pushed Sarah to her limits and beyond. She learned to operate in underwater environments for extended periods, to parachute into hostile territory under cover of darkness, and to survive in extreme conditions with minimal equipment. But the mental aspects of the training were equally challenging. She studied foreign languages, learned to analyze complex intelligence reports, and practiced making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Of the 20 officers who began the program with her, only 8 successfully completed all phases of training. Sarah was among them, and she had finished first in overall rankings. The commanding officer of the training facility, a decorated admiral whose name she was told she must never reveal, personally congratulated her on her achievement. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, using her newly promoted rank, "you have demonstrated exceptional capabilities. What you do with these skills will define not only your career, but potentially impact national security in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Remember that with great capability comes great responsibility." Sarah's first operational assignment took her to Southeast Asia, where she worked with a small team to gather intelligence on suspected terrorist activities. The mission required her to pose as a civilian contractor while secretly monitoring communications and tracking the movements of several individuals believed to be planning attacks on American interests. For 3 months, she lived in a modest apartment in a bustling city, maintaining her cover while carefully collecting information. The work was painstaking and often dangerous. She had to be constantly vigilant, always aware that a single mistake could expose her identity and put her life in jeopardy. The mission proved successful when her intelligence led to the disruption of a planned bombing that could have killed hundreds of innocent people. However, Sarah never learned the full details of how her information was used. She was simply told that her work had been valuable and that she should prepare for her next assignment. Over the following years, Sarah undertook numerous missions across the globe. She operated in war zones, infiltrated criminal organizations, and worked with foreign intelligence agencies to combat threats to American security. Each assignment taught her new skills and tested her abilities in different ways. She learned to speak fluent Arabic, Mandarin, and Russian. She became an expert in various forms of combat and weapons systems. Most importantly, she developed an intuitive understanding of human psychology that allowed her to blend into any environment and gain the trust of potential sources of information. Despite her growing expertise and the increasing complexity of her missions, Sarah remained humble about her achievements. She never spoke about her work with family or friends, maintaining the cover story that she was a logistics officer working on supply chain management. Her parents knew she was stationed overseas frequently, but they had no idea their daughter was one of the Navy's most valuable covert operatives. The nature of her work meant that Sarah often felt isolated from normal social connections. She couldn't share her experiences or discuss the challenges she faced with anyone outside her immediate operational circle. This isolation was perhaps the greatest sacrifice her career demanded, but she accepted it as a necessary price for the privilege of serving her country in such a critical capacity. As she gained experience and proved herself repeatedly, Sarah began to take on leadership roles within her Special Operations Unit. She was promoted to lieutenant commander and given responsibility for planning and executing increasingly complex missions. Her superiors noted her ability to think strategically while maintaining focus on operational details, a rare combination that made her invaluable for high-stakes assignments. One particularly challenging mission required her to spend 6 months infiltrating an international arms dealing network. She posed as a wealthy businesswoman looking to invest in legitimate enterprises while secretly documenting the organization's illegal activities. The assignment required her to attend social events, build relationships with dangerous individuals, and maintain her cover while under constant scrutiny. The mission's success led to the arrest of 17 individuals and the seizure of weapons that were destined for terrorist organizations. Sarah's role in the operation remained classified, but Her commanding officers recognized her contribution with a commendation that would remain sealed in her classified personnel file. As her career progressed, Sarah found herself working more frequently with other branches of the military and with intelligence agencies. She participated in joint operations with the Army Special Forces, the Air Force's Special Operations Units, and various civilian intelligence organizations. These collaborative efforts broadened her understanding of how different military and intelligence assets work together to address national security challenges. During one joint operation, she worked alongside a team of Army Rangers to extract a high-value target from a hostile region. The mission required precise coordination between ground forces, air support, and intelligence assets. Sarah's role was to provide real-time intelligence analysis and to serve as a liaison between different units involved in the operation. The extraction was successful, but it came at a cost. Several team members were wounded during the operation, and Sarah found herself providing medical assistance while continuing to coordinate intelligence support. The experience reinforced her understanding of the human cost of the work she did and strengthened her resolve to ensure that every mission was planned and executed with the utmost care for the safety of all personnel involved. Her performance during this operation caught the attention of senior leaders in the special operations community. She was selected for advanced leadership training and began to be considered for positions of greater responsibility within the special operations hierarchy. The training she received during this period focused on strategic thinking, resource management, and the political dimensions of special operations. She learned to analyze complex geopolitical situations and to develop operational plans that took into account not just tactical considerations, but also diplomatic and political implications. Sarah's analytical skills and her ability to see the bigger picture while maintaining attention to operational details made her a valuable asset in planning rooms where senior officers developed strategies for addressing emerging threats. She found herself briefing admirals and generals on intelligence findings and operational recommendations. Despite her growing influence and responsibility, Sarah continued to participate in field operations. She believed that staying connected to the operational side of her work was essential for maintaining her credibility as a leader and for understanding the real-world implications of the plans she helped develop. One such field operation took her to Africa, where she led a small team in a mission to gather intelligence on a warlord who was suspected of providing support to international terrorist organizations. The mission required her team to operate in a region where the government had little control and where various armed groups competed for territory and resources. For 2 months, Sarah and her team lived among the local population, carefully building relationships and gathering information about the warlord's activities. The work was dangerous and required constant vigilance, as their presence in the region could not be officially acknowledged by the United States government. The intelligence they gathered provided crucial insights into the warlord's network and led to a series of operations that significantly disrupted his organization's ability to support terrorist activities. Sarah's leadership during this mission was recognized by her superiors, and she was promoted to the rank of commander. With her promotion came new responsibilities and opportunities. She was assigned to a position within the Special Operations Command structure where she had oversight of multiple operational teams and played a key role in strategic planning for the Special Operations community. The transition from being primarily an operational officer to having significant administrative and strategic responsibilities was challenging. Sarah had to learn to balance her desire to remain involved in field operations with the demands of her new leadership role. She found that her operational experience gave her credibility with the officers and enlisted personnel under her command, but she also had to develop new skills in resource management, personnel development, and strategic communication. As a commander, Sarah was responsible for ensuring that her teams were properly trained, equipped, and supported for their missions. She worked closely with training facilities to develop curricula that reflected the evolving nature of threats and the changing operational environment. She also played a role in recruiting and selecting personnel for special operations positions. Her experience in the field gave her unique insights into what qualities were most important for success in special operations. She looked for individuals who demonstrated not just physical and mental toughness, but also adaptability, cultural sensitivity, and the ability to think creatively under pressure. Sarah's reputation within the special operations community continued to grow as she successfully led her command through a series of challenging assignments. Her teams consistently performed at the highest levels, and the intelligence they provided was instrumental in preventing numerous threats to American interests around the world. The success of her command brought her to the attention of the highest levels of military leadership. She began to be invited to participate in strategic planning sessions with senior officers from all branches of the military and with representatives from various government agencies. In these high-level meetings, Sarah found herself one of the few officers with extensive operational experience in the special operations field. Her insights were valued by senior leaders who were making decisions about resource allocation, strategic priorities, and operational policies. Despite the demands of her position, Sarah made it a point to stay connected with the personnel under her command. She regularly visited training facilities and operational units, and she made herself available to officers and enlisted personnel who sought her guidance or who had concerns about their assignments. Her approachable leadership style and her genuine concern for the welfare of her personnel earned her respect throughout the special operations community. She was known as an officer who would fight for her people and who would never ask them to undertake risks that she wouldn't be willing to take herself. As she approached her 15th year of service, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her from a small farming town in Iowa to a position of significant responsibility within one of the military's most elite communities. She had achieved more than she could have imagined when she first decided to join the Navy, but she also recognized that her greatest challenges and opportunities might still lie ahead. The world was changing rapidly, and the threats facing the United States were becoming increasingly complex and sophisticated. Sarah knew that the special operations community would need to continue evolving to address these emerging challenges, and she was determined to play a role in ensuring that America's elite military units remained the most capable and effective in the world. Her dedication to excellence and her commitment to serving her country had already taken her far beyond what anyone might have expected from a young woman from rural Iowa. But Sarah Mitchell was just getting started, and the most significant chapters of her story were yet to be written. Commander Sarah Mitchell walked through the corridors of the Pentagon with the same quiet confidence that had characterized her entire military career. At 38, she had been selected for a special assignment that would place her in direct contact with the highest levels of military leadership. Her official title was Special Operations Liaison Officer, but those who knew understood that her real role was far more complex and sensitive. The assignment had come as something of a surprise, even to someone accustomed to unexpected developments in her career. She had been working at the Special Operations Command headquarters, managing a portfolio of classified programs that spanned multiple geographic regions and operational domains. Her work involved coordinating with various government agencies and ensuring that special operations capabilities were properly integrated with broader national security strategies. The call had come on a Tuesday morning while she was reviewing intelligence reports from Southeast Asia. Her secretary informed her that Admiral Harrison Webb, the director of Special Operations, wanted to see her immediately. Admiral Webb was a legendary figure in the special operations community, known for his tactical brilliance and his absolute dedication to the personnel under his command. Sarah had met Admiral Webb on several occasions, but she had never had a private meeting with him. As she walked to his office, she wondered what assignment could be so important that it required the personal attention of the Director of Special Operations. Admiral Webb's office was surprisingly modest for someone of his rank and influence. The walls were decorated with photos from various operations and commendation from grateful foreign governments, but The overall atmosphere was one of professional functionality rather than ostentation. "Commander Mitchell," Admiral Webb said as she entered, "please have a seat. I have something important to discuss with you." Sarah sat down and waited for the Admiral to continue. She had learned early in her career that senior officers appreciated subordinates who listened more than they spoke. "Commander," Admiral Webb began, "you've been selected for a very special assignment. The Pentagon is implementing a new initiative to improve coordination between special operations and conventional forces. They need someone with your background and expertise to serve as a liaison officer between various commands." He paused and studied her reaction before continuing. "This isn't a typical assignment, Commander. You'll be working directly with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and with senior commanders from all branches of the service. You'll be involved in strategic planning at the highest levels, and you'll have access to information that very few officers ever see." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The opportunity to work at such a high level was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. "Sir," she said, "I'm honored by this opportunity. What would my specific duties involve?" Admiral Webb smiled. "That's the beauty of this assignment, Commander. Your duties will evolve based on the needs of the moment. You'll be a troubleshooter, a strategic analyst, and a bridge between different communities within the military. Most importantly, you'll be representing the special operations community in venues where our perspective hasn't always been adequately represented." He handed her a classified briefing folder. "Read this tonight. Report to room 2 times 10 to the power of 924 in the Pentagon tomorrow morning at 0800. Colonel Martinez will provide you with additional details about your assignment." That evening, Sarah sat in her modest apartment in Arlington and read through the briefing materials. The scope of her new assignment was broader than she had anticipated. She would be working on issues ranging from counterterrorism strategy to humanitarian operations, from cyber warfare to traditional military conflicts. The briefing materials also included biographical information about the senior officers she would be working with. The list read like a who's who of military leadership: generals who had commanded forces in major conflicts, admirals who had shaped naval strategy for decades, and intelligence officials who had devoted their careers to protecting national security. As she read through the profiles, Sarah realized that she would be the most junior officer in most of the meetings she would attend. She would also be one of the few women in a community that remained predominantly male. The challenge didn't intimidate her. She had faced similar situations throughout her career, but she understood that she would need to prove herself once again. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Pentagon 30 minutes early. She had learned that punctuality was not just about being on time. It was about having time to prepare mentally for whatever challenges the day might bring. She used the extra time to familiarize herself with the layout of the corridors near her new office and to review her notes one final time. Colonel Martinez turned out to be a career Army officer with extensive experience in special operations and conventional warfare. He had a reputation for being demanding but fair, and Sarah could see why he had been selected to supervise her transition into her new role. "Commander Mitchell," he said as she entered his office, "welcome to the strategic planning community. I hope you're ready for a different kind of challenge than what you're used to." Over the next few hours, Colonel Martinez briefed Sarah on the various committees and working groups she would be involved with. The list was extensive. The Joint Special Operations Planning Committee, the Interagency Counterterrorism Task Force, the Strategic Studies Group, and several others that were identified only by code names. "The most important thing to remember," Colonel Martinez explained, "is that your job is to represent the special operations perspective while also understanding and respecting the viewpoints of conventional forces and other government agencies. You'll often be the only person in the room with your particular background and experience." Sarah's first major meeting was scheduled for the following week. It was a strategic planning session focused on developing options for addressing emerging threats in a volatile region of the world. The meeting would include representatives from all military services, several government agencies, and academic experts on the region in question. Preparing for the meeting required Sarah to immerse herself in background materials on the region's history, current political situation, and the various actors who influence stability and security. She found the analytical work fascinating, but she also recognized that her operational experience gave her insights that were different from those of officers who had spent their careers in staff positions. The meeting took place in a secure conference room in the Pentagon. When Sarah arrived, she found herself in a room with 24 senior officers and civilian officials. She was clearly the most junior person present, and she was one of only 3 women in the room. The meeting was led by a 3-star general who had extensive experience in the region under discussion. As the participants went around the table introducing themselves, Sarah was impressed by the breadth of expertise represented in the room. There were regional experts, intelligence analysts, logisticians, and commanders who had led forces in similar environments. When it came time for Sarah to introduce herself, she kept her remarks brief and professional. Commander Sarah Mitchell, Special Operations Command. I've had operational experience in similar environments, and I'm here to provide the special operations perspective on the options under consideration. The discussion that followed was intense and wide-ranging. Participants debated various courses of action, analyzed potential risks and benefits, and considered the political implications of different approaches. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes, and beginning to understand how strategic planning worked at this level. About 2 hours into the meeting, the general leading the discussion turned to Sarah. "Commander Mitchell," he said, "you've been quiet so far. What's the special operations perspective on the option we just discussed?" Sarah had been expecting this moment, and she had carefully thought through her response. "Sir," she began, "from a special operations standpoint, the plan has merit, but it may be underestimating the complexity of the human terrain in the target area. Special operations forces have worked in similar environments, and we've learned that local population dynamics can be as important as enemy capabilities in determining mission success." She went on to explain how special operations forces approach the challenge of working in complex environments where the distinction between friendly, hostile, and neutral actors was often unclear. Her comments sparked a broader discussion about intelligence requirements and the need for cultural understanding in military planning. After the meeting, several of the senior officers approached Sarah to continue the conversation. They were clearly impressed by her insights and interested in learning more about special operations capabilities and limitations. Colonel Martinez later told her that her contributions to the discussion had been noted by the meeting's leadership. "You struck exactly the right tone," he said. "You provided valuable insights without being presumptuous, and you demonstrated that special operations officers can think strategically as well as tactically." Over the following months, Sarah found herself increasingly involved in high-level strategic discussions. Her unique background, combining extensive operational experience with analytical skills, made her valuable in forums where strategic concepts had to be translated into operational realities. She worked on plans for humanitarian operations, counterterrorism initiatives, and conventional military deployments. In each case, she found that her role was to help senior leaders understand how special operations capabilities could be integrated with broader military efforts and how the lessons learned from special operations could inform larger strategic approaches. The work was intellectually stimulating, but it also required Sarah to develop new skills. She had to learn to communicate complex operational concepts to audiences that included civilian policymakers who had limited military experience. She also had to master the art of bureaucratic navigation, learning how to build coalitions and generate support for ideas across different organizations and agencies. One of the most challenging aspects of her new role was the need to balance operational security requirements with the need for transparency in strategic planning. Many of the special operations capabilities she was familiar with were classified at very high levels, but strategic planning often required sharing information across different organizations with varying security clearances. Sarah learned to describe special operations capabilities in terms that conveyed their potential utility without revealing specific methods or technologies. This required her to think carefully about every presentation and every written analysis she produced. As she became more established in her role, Sarah began to develop relationships with senior officers from all branches of the military. She found that many of them were genuinely interested in understanding special operations better, and they appreciated having someone who could explain special operations concepts in terms they could relate to their own experiences. One such relationship developed with Admiral Patricia Harrison, a senior Navy officer who had commanded aircraft carrier battle groups and who now served on the Joint Staff. Admiral Harrison had a reputation for being both brilliant and demanding, and she had been instrumental in developing new approaches to naval warfare. Admiral Harrison initially seemed skeptical of Sarah's presence in strategic planning forums. During one early meeting, she questioned whether someone with Sarah's relatively junior rank could provide valuable insights to discussions involving such senior leadership. However, over time, Admiral Harrison came to appreciate Sarah's contributions. After one particularly complex planning session, she approached Sarah privately. "Commander," she said, "I have to admit that I was initially doubtful about having a junior officer involved in these discussions. But you've proven that rank isn't always the best measure of the value someone can bring to strategic planning. Your operational experience gives you perspectives that those of us who've spent more time in staff positions sometimes lack." The conversation with Admiral Harrison was significant for Sarah because it represented a broader acceptance of her role within the senior leadership community. She had proven that she could contribute meaningfully to strategic discussions, and senior officers were beginning to seek out her input on issues related to special operations. As her reputation grew, Sarah found herself being invited to participate in even more sensitive discussions. She was asked to provide input on covert action proposals, to analyze intelligence assessments related to special operations targets, and to contribute to strategic communications planning. The increased responsibility brought new challenges. Sarah had to be even more careful about operational security, and she had to ensure that her analyses were thoroughly researched and carefully considered. A mistake at her level could have implications that extended far beyond special operations to broader national security policy. Despite the pressure, Sarah thrived in her new role. She found the strategic planning work intellectually rewarding, and she appreciated the opportunity to influence decisions that could affect the safety and security of special operations personnel around the world. Her success in the liaison role also opened new career opportunities. She was promoted to captain and began to be considered for command positions within the special operations community. The experience she had gained working with senior leadership from all military services would be valuable regardless of what direction her career took next. As she approached her 20th year of military service, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from her origins in rural Iowa. She had not only succeeded in one of the military's most demanding communities, but she had also earned the respect of senior leaders across the entire military establishment. However, Sarah knew that her most challenging moments were still ahead. The strategic environment was becoming increasingly complex, and the military was being asked to address threats that were unlike anything it had faced in the past. Her role in helping the military adapt to these new challenges would be more important than ever. The work she was doing required her to think not just about current operations, but about how special operations might need to evolve to meet future threats. She found herself involved in discussions about new technologies, new organizational structures, and new approaches to training and development. Sarah's insights were particularly valuable because she understood both the potential and the limitations of special operations forces. She could help senior leaders understand when special operations was the right tool for a particular problem and when conventional forces or other approaches might be more appropriate. As she continued to build her reputation within the senior leadership community, Sarah began to realize that she was in a unique position to shape the future of special operations. The relationships she had developed and the credibility she had earned gave her influence that extended far beyond her official rank. The opportunity to have such influence was both exciting and sobering. Sarah knew that the decisions being made in the Pentagon would affect the lives of service members around the world, and she felt the weight of that responsibility every day. But she also knew that this was exactly the kind of challenge she had been preparing for throughout her entire career. Every difficult training exercise, every dangerous mission, and every complex planning session had been building toward this moment when she could help shape the strategic direction of American special operations. Sarah Mitchell had come a long way from the farm girl who had decided to join the Navy on a whim. But in many ways, her journey was just beginning, and the most important contributions of her career were still ahead of her. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in the hallway outside the main conference room at Naval Special Operations Command, reviewing her notes one final time. Today's briefing was particularly important because it would include senior leaders from all branches of special operations, including several admirals and generals who rarely attended the same meeting. The purpose of the gathering was to discuss a new strategic initiative that would reshape how special operations forces were organized and deployed around the world. Sarah had spent weeks preparing her portion of the briefing, which focused on how the initiative would affect coordination between different special operations units. As she waited for the meeting to begin, Sarah reflected on how much her career had evolved over the past 2 years. Her role as a strategic liaison had expanded significantly, and she now found herself regularly briefing the most senior leaders in the military. The work was demanding, but it was also exactly the kind of challenge she had always sought. The conference room was already crowded when Sarah entered. She recognized most of the faces around the table, generals and admirals she had worked with during her time in the Pentagon, along with several civilian officials for various government agencies. The atmosphere was professional but relaxed, with the easy camaraderie that develops among senior leaders who have worked together for many years. Sarah took her assigned seat about halfway down the table and continued reviewing her materials. She had learned that preparation was crucial for these high-level meetings, where the discussion could shift rapidly from one topic to another and where participants were expected to have detailed knowledge of complex issues. The meeting was called to order by Admiral James Patterson, the commander of Naval Special Operations Command. Admiral Patterson was a highly respected leader who had commanded special operations forces in multiple theaters and who was known for his strategic vision and his ability to build consensus among diverse groups. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Patterson began, thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to participate in today's discussion. We have a lot of ground to cover, and I want to ensure we make the most of our time together. The first hour of the meeting consisted of briefings on various aspects of the strategic initiative. Sarah listened carefully as different speakers presented information on resource requirements, timeline considerations, and potential challenges. She took notes and mentally prepared for her own presentation, which was scheduled for later in the meeting. When Admiral Patterson called for a break, Sarah remained in her seat and continued reviewing her notes. She was so focused on her preparation that she didn't notice when someone sat down in the chair next to her. "Excuse me," said a voice that carried the unmistakable authority of senior rank. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Sarah looked up to see a tall man in his early 50s wearing the uniform of a Navy admiral. She didn't immediately recognize him, which was unusual given her extensive interactions with senior naval leadership. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to command, and there was something about his presence that suggested significant operational experience. "Admiral," Sarah said, standing and offering her hand, "Captain Sarah Mitchell. I'm with Special Operations Command." The Admiral studied her for a moment with what appeared to be amusement. "Captain Mitchell," he said with a slight smile, "tell me, what's your rank?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had clearly stated her rank when she introduced herself, and her shoulder boards clearly displayed the insignia of a Navy captain. For a moment, she wondered if she had misheard the Admiral's question. "Sir," she replied, maintaining her professional composure, "I'm a captain in the United States Navy." The Admiral's smile widened. Captain, I was making a joke. You're awfully young to be a captain, and you don't look like most of the captains I know. I was wondering if maybe you were a lieutenant who had borrowed someone else's uniform for the day. Sarah felt a flash of irritation, but kept her expression neutral. She had encountered this kind of skepticism before, particularly early in her career, and she had learned to respond with professionalism rather than defensiveness. "No, sir," she said evenly. "I'm definitely a captain, and this is definitely my uniform." Before the Admiral could respond, the break ended and everyone returned to their seats. Sarah didn't have time to think about the exchange because Admiral Patterson was calling her to the podium to deliver her briefing. Sarah's presentation focused on the coordination challenges that would arise from the new strategic initiative. She had identified several potential problems and had developed recommendations for addressing them. The briefing required her to demonstrate detailed knowledge of special operations capabilities across all military services, and she had to present her analysis in terms that would be meaningful to both military and civilian audiences. As she spoke, Sarah was aware that she had the full attention of everyone in the room. Senior leaders leaned forward to hear her analysis, and several took detailed notes on her recommendations. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Admiral Patterson spoke. "Captain Mitchell," he said, "that was an outstanding analysis. You've identified issues that could have created significant problems down the road, and your recommendations are practical and well thought out. Thank you." The praise from Admiral Patterson was echoed by several other senior officers around the table. Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction as she returned to her seat, knowing that her analysis would influence how the strategic initiative was implemented. As the meeting continued, Sarah noticed that the Admiral who had questioned her rank was watching her with apparent interest. During subsequent discussions, he occasionally nodded when she made comments or asked questions, and she began to sense that his earlier skepticism was giving way to something like respect. The meeting concluded with a discussion of next steps and assignments for follow-up work. Sarah was tasked with leading a working group that would develop detailed implementation plans for several aspects of the strategic initiative. The assignment was both an honor and a significant responsibility, as it would put her in charge of coordinating efforts among officers from different services and agencies. As participants began to file out of the conference room, the Admiral who had questioned her rank approached Sarah again. This time, his manner was noticeably different from their earlier interaction. "Captain Mitchell," he said, "I owe you an apology. My earlier comment was inappropriate, and I want you to know that I was impressed by your briefing. It's clear that you've earned your rank through exceptional performance." Sarah appreciated the apology, but she was also curious about the Admiral's identity. "Thank you, sir. I don't believe I caught your name during our earlier conversation." The Admiral extended his hand. "Admiral Robert Shun, Naval Special Warfare Command. I've been following your work through the strategic planning process, and I have to say that your reputation is well-deserved." The name clicked for Sarah immediately. Admiral Chun was a legendary figure in the special operations community, known for his leadership during some of the most challenging operations of the past 2 decades. He had commanded SEAL teams, special operations task forces, and major naval commands, and he was widely regarded as one of the most capable leaders in the military. "Admiral Chun," Sarah said, "it's an honor to meet you, sir. I've read about your operations in the classified histories, and your leadership is something many of us aspire to emulate." Admiral Chun waved off the praise. "Captain, based on what I saw today, you don't need to emulate anyone. You've clearly developed your own leadership style, and it's quite effective. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I can recognize exceptional talent when I see it." As they talked, several other senior officers approached to join the conversation. Sarah found herself in the center of a group that included some of the most respected leaders in special operations. They discussed various aspects of her briefing and asked detailed questions about her recommendations. What struck Sarah most about the conversation was how these senior leaders treated her as an equal. Despite the significant difference in their ranks and experience, they clearly valued her insights and respected her expertise. It was a moment that marked a significant milestone in her career. The conversation was interrupted when someone called Admiral Chen's name from across the room. As he prepared to leave, he turned back to Sarah. "Captain Mitchell," he said, "I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together more closely in the future. The special operations community needs leaders who can think strategically while maintaining operational credibility, and you clearly possess both qualities." As Admiral Chen walked away, Sarah was approached by Admiral Patterson, who had observed the entire exchange. "Captain," Admiral Patterson said with a knowing smile, "I see you've made an impression on Admiral Chen. That's not easy to do, and he's quite discerning when it comes to evaluating talent." Sarah was still processing the significance of her interaction with Admiral Chen when Admiral Patterson continued. "Captain, there's something you should know about Admiral Chen's comment regarding your rank. He wasn't really questioning whether you were actually a captain. He was testing you to see how you would respond to that kind of challenge." Admiral Patterson explained that Admiral Chen was known for using various methods to evaluate officers he was meeting for the first time. Sometimes he would challenge their knowledge, sometimes he would question their experience, and sometimes he would make comments designed to test their composure under pressure. "The fact that you responded professionally rather than defensively told him a lot about your character," Admiral Patterson said. "And then your briefing demonstrated your competence. That combination, character and competence, is exactly what Admiral Chen looks for in potential leaders." The revelation gave Sarah new insight into her interaction with Admiral Chen. What she had initially interpreted as skepticism about her qualifications had actually been a form of evaluation. The fact that she had apparently passed the evaluation was both gratifying and somewhat intimidating. As Sarah left the conference room, she reflected on the day's events. The meeting had been successful from a professional standpoint. Her briefing had been well received, and she had been given additional responsibilities that would advance her career. But the interaction with Admiral Chen had been personally significant in ways she was still trying to understand. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself thinking frequently about her conversation with Admiral Chen. She began to understand that her career had reached a point where she was being evaluated not just for her current performance, but for her potential to take on even greater responsibilities in the future. The working group she had been assigned to lead included officers from all branches of special operations, along with representatives from various government agencies. Managing such a diverse group required Sarah to use all of the leadership skills she had developed over her career, and the experience taught her new lessons about building consensus among strong-willed professionals with different backgrounds and perspectives. The working group's final report was well received by senior leadership, and Sarah's role in producing it was widely recognized. She began to receive informal feedback that her name was being mentioned in discussions about future command opportunities and senior staff positions. About a month after the meeting where she had met Admiral Chen, Sarah received a call from his office requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration on a new initiative. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Admiral Chen's headquarters. Sarah spent considerable time preparing for the meeting, researching Admiral Chen's background, and trying to anticipate what kind of collaboration he might have in mind. She knew that working with someone of his stature and reputation could be a significant opportunity for her career, but she also understood that it would come with high expectations and intense scrutiny. The meeting took place in Admiral Chen's office, which was decorated with mementos from his various commands and operations. Unlike some senior officers who used their offices to project authority, Admiral Chen's office felt more like a working space where serious business was conducted. "Captain Mitchell," Admiral Chen said as she entered, "thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I wanted to discuss an opportunity that I think might interest you." He explained that he was developing a new program designed to improve integration between special operations forces and conventional military units. The program would require someone with both operational experience and strategic planning skills to serve as its director. "Based on your background and your performance in recent strategic planning efforts," Admiral Chen said, "I believe you would be ideal for this position. The job would involve working directly with senior commanders from all services, and it would give you experience in program development and resource management. Sarah was intrigued by the opportunity, but also somewhat surprised. The position Admiral Chun was describing would typically be filled by someone with significantly more senior rank and experience. "Admiral," she said, "I'm honored that you would consider me for this position, but I have to ask, wouldn't this normally be a job for someone more senior?" Admiral Chun nodded. "Normally, yes. But this program requires someone who understands both the operational and strategic sides of special operations and who can work effectively with people across the entire military hierarchy. Your recent work has demonstrated that you possess those capabilities." He went on to explain that the program would be highly visible within the Pentagon and would likely influence how special operations forces were employed for years to come. The director of the program would have significant autonomy, but would also be accountable to senior leadership for the program's success. "Captain," Admiral Chun concluded, "this is an opportunity to shape the future of special operations while advancing your own career. But I want you to understand that it would also be a significant challenge. Are you interested?" Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The opportunity Admiral Chun was describing represented exactly the kind of challenge she had always sought, but it would also require her to step outside her comfort zone and take on responsibilities unlike anything she had previously experienced. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm very interested." Admiral Chun smiled. "I thought you might be." Let's discuss the details. Captain Sarah Mitchell sat in her new office at the Pentagon, surrounded by boxes of classified documents and strategic planning materials. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chun had offered her the position as director of the Special Operations Integration Program, and the assignment had proven to be everything he had promised: challenging, influential, and occasionally overwhelming. The program she now led was designed to address one of the most persistent challenges facing modern military operations: how to effectively integrate special operations forces with conventional military units. For decades, the two communities had operated largely separately, with different training, different equipment, and often different objectives. Sarah's job was to develop new approaches that would allow them to work together more effectively. The work required her to think simultaneously about tactical operations and strategic implications, about current capabilities and future requirements, about military effectiveness and political constraints. It was exactly the kind of complex challenge that had drawn her to special operations in the first place, but magnified to a level she had never previously experienced. Her team included officers from all branches of the military, civilian analysts from various government agencies, and academic experts in military affairs. Managing such a diverse group required Sarah to use every leadership skill she had developed over her career, and the experience was teaching her new lessons about building consensus and driving innovation in large, complex organizations. One of the most challenging aspects of her new role was the need to brief senior leaders on highly technical issues that often had significant political implications. Sarah found herself regularly presenting to 4-star generals and admirals who had the authority to approve or disapprove programs that could cost billions of dollars and affect thousands of military personnel. The pressure was intense, but Sarah thrived in the environment. Her operational background gave her credibility when discussing tactical issues, while her strategic planning experience allowed her to address broader policy questions. Senior leaders increasingly sought her input on issues that extended well beyond her specific program responsibilities. As her influence grew, Sarah began to attract attention from the highest levels of government. She was invited to participate in National Security Council discussions, to brief congressional committees, and to represent the military at international conferences on defense issues. The increased visibility brought new opportunities, but also new scrutiny. Sarah's every decision was now subject to analysis by senior leaders who had the power to make or break careers. She learned to be even more careful in her planning and more thorough in her analysis, knowing that mistakes at her level could have far-reaching consequences. One morning in late spring, Sarah received a call from Admiral Chen's office requesting an immediate meeting. When she arrived at his headquarters, she found him reviewing a classified message that had clearly captured his full attention. "Captain," Admiral Chen said as she entered his office, "we may have a problem. I've just received word about a situation developing in the Eastern Pacific that could require a complex special operations response. The details are still classified at the highest levels, but it appears we may need to implement some of the integration concepts your program has been developing." He handed her a briefing folder marked with classification levels that Sarah had rarely encountered. As she read through the materials, she began to understand the complexity of the situation Admiral Chan was describing. A hostile nation had apparently been developing advanced military capabilities on a remote island chain, capabilities that could threaten shipping lanes critical to international commerce. Intelligence agencies believed that the installations were protected by both conventional forces and specialized units that would be extremely difficult to neutralize using traditional military approaches. "Captain," Admiral Chen continued, "this could be exactly the kind of scenario where integrated special operations and conventional forces could provide capabilities that neither could achieve alone. The question is whether we're ready to implement the concepts your program has been developing." Sarah studied the intelligence summaries and began to see how her program's work could apply to the situation. The proposed response would require careful coordination between multiple types of military units, each with different capabilities and limitations. Success would depend on precisely the kind of integration her team had been working to achieve. "Admiral," she said, "I believe we could adapt our integration protocols to this scenario, but it would require careful planning and extensive preparation. The concepts we've developed are sound, but they've never been tested in a real-world operation of this complexity." Admiral Chen nodded. "That's exactly what I expected you to say. Captain, I want you to begin developing operational plans based on your integration concepts. This may be a theoretical exercise, or it may become very real very quickly. Either way, it will be an important test of everything your program has been working toward." Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself working 18-hour days as she and her team developed detailed plans for the hypothetical operation. The planning process required them to consider every aspect of how special operations and conventional forces could work together, from intelligence gathering to logistical support to tactical execution. The work was made more challenging by the need to coordinate with multiple commands and agencies, each with their own priorities and constraints. Sarah had to navigate complex bureaucratic relationships while maintaining focus on operational requirements and strategic objectives. As the planning process continued, Sarah began to realize that she was no longer just developing theoretical concepts. She was creating operational plans that could actually be implemented. The transition from academic exercise to potential reality added a new level of intensity to her work. The plans her team developed were briefed to increasingly senior levels of leadership, and each briefing resulted in new questions and requirements. Sarah found herself explaining tactical details to strategic planners and strategic implications to operational commanders. 3 weeks into the planning process, Sarah was summoned to a meeting that included some of the most senior leaders in the military. The meeting took place in a secure conference room deep within the Pentagon, and the participants included several 4-star generals and admirals along with senior civilian officials. The meeting was chaired by General Patricia Hawkins, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Hawkins was widely respected for her strategic vision and her ability to manage complex military operations, and Sarah had never previously been in a meeting that she was leading personally. "Captain Mitchell," General Hawkins began, "I've been reviewing the operational plans your team has developed, and I'm impressed by the level of detail and the innovative approaches you've proposed. However, I have some questions about the feasibility of implementing these concepts in a real-world environment." What followed was the most intensive questioning Sarah had ever experienced. General Hawkins and the other senior leaders probed every aspect of the operational plans, testing assumptions and challenging recommendations. They asked detailed questions about logistical requirements, risk assessments, and contingency planning. Sarah found herself drawing on everything she had learned throughout her career as she responded to their questions. She used her operational experience to explain tactical considerations, her strategic planning background to address policy implications, and her leadership experience to discuss personnel and organizational issues. The questioning session lasted for more than 2 hours, and Sarah could feel the weight of the senior leader's expectations. She knew that her responses would influence not only the fate of her specific program, but potentially the future direction of special operations integration across the entire military. When the questioning finally ended, General Hawkins called for a brief recess. As the senior leaders filed out of the conference room, Sarah remained in her seat and tried to process what had just happened. She had just been subjected to the most intense professional scrutiny of her career, and she wasn't sure how well she had performed. Admiral Chun, who had been present for the entire session, approached her during the break. "Captain," he said quietly, "that was an impressive performance. I've seen a lot of officers crumble under that kind of pressure, but you handled it exceptionally well." General Hawkins is not easy to impress, but I could see that she was taking your recommendations seriously. When the meeting resumed, General Hawkins addressed Sarah directly. "Captain Mitchell," she said, "based on your presentation and your responses to our questions, I'm prepared to recommend that your integration concepts be approved for implementation. However, I want to be clear about what this means." General Hawkins explained that approving the concepts would require Sarah to oversee their implementation across multiple commands and geographic regions. She would be responsible for training personnel, coordinating equipment and logistics, and ensuring that the integration protocols worked as designed. "This would be a significant expansion of your current responsibilities," General Hawkins continued, "and it would require you to work directly with some of the most senior commanders in the military. Are you prepared to take on this level of responsibility?" Sarah felt a moment of trepidation as she considered the magnitude of what General Hawkins was proposing. The opportunity represented the pinnacle of everything she had worked toward throughout her career, but it would also place her in a position where failure could have consequences that extended far beyond her personal career. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied. "I'm prepared to take on this responsibility." General Hawkins smiled. "Very good, Captain. You'll receive detailed implementation guidance within the next few days. Congratulations on an outstanding piece of work." As the meeting concluded and the senior leaders departed, Sarah realized that her career had just reached another major turning point. The approval of her integration concepts would not only validate years of work, but would also position her as one of the leading experts on special operations integration in the entire military. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as Sarah worked to implement the newly approved concepts across multiple military commands. She found herself traveling constantly, briefing commanders, training personnel, and overseeing the establishment of new operational procedures. The work was exhausting, but exhilarating. Sarah could see her theoretical concepts being translated into practical capabilities that would enhance the military's ability to address complex threats around the world. She was making a direct contribution to national security in ways she had never imagined when she first decided to join the Navy. As she traveled from one command to another, Sarah began to notice that her reputation was preceding her. Senior commanders who had never met her personally were familiar with her work and eager to implement her concepts in their own organizations. The recognition was gratifying, but it also brought new challenges. Sarah found herself under constant scrutiny from commanders who wanted to ensure that the integration concepts would work in their specific environments and circumstances. Each implementation required Sarah to adapt her concepts to different operational requirements and organizational cultures. She learned to be flexible in her approach while maintaining the core principles that made the integration concepts effective. The experience taught her valuable lessons about leadership and change management in large organizations. She learned that successful innovation required not just good ideas, but also the ability to build support among diverse stakeholders and to overcome institutional resistance to change. As the implementation process continued, Sarah began to receive feedback about the effectiveness of her integration concepts in real-world operations. The reports were overwhelmingly positive, with commanders noting improved coordination, enhanced capabilities, and better operational outcomes. The success of the implementation brought Sarah to the attention of even more senior leaders, and she began to be discussed as a candidate for promotion and for assignment to increasingly important positions within the military hierarchy. 6 months after the initial approval of her concepts, Sarah was called to another high-level meeting. This time, the meeting was held in the office of the Secretary of Defense, and the participants included the most senior military and civilian leaders in the Department of Defense. As Sarah prepared for the meeting, she reflected on how far she had come from her origins as a young officer fresh out of training. She had not only succeeded in one of the military's most demanding fields, but had also become a recognized expert whose work was influencing the future direction of American military capabilities. But she also knew that her greatest challenges might still lie ahead. The success of her integration concept had positioned her for even greater responsibilities, and the next phase of her career would test her abilities in ways she couldn't yet imagine. As she walked toward the secretary's office, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She was about to enter a meeting that could determine the future direction of her career, and she was determined to make the most of the opportunity she had worked so hard to create. The morning arrived clear and calm, but Captain Sarah Mitchell felt the weight of anticipation as she prepared for what would prove to be the most significant day of her military career. She had been summoned to participate in a joint military exercise that would serve as the ultimate test of the integration concept she had spent years developing. The exercise, codenamed Operation Synthesis, was designed to simulate a complex military scenario that would require unprecedented coordination between special operations forces and conventional military units. Senior leaders from across the Department of Defense would be observing, and the results would influence military planning for years to come. Sarah had arrived at the exercise location 3 days earlier to oversee final preparations. The site was a remote training facility that had been configured to replicate the challenging environment where the integration concepts might need to be employed in actual operations. Every detail had been carefully planned to ensure that the exercise would provide a realistic test of the new approaches. As exercise director, Sarah was responsible for coordinating the activities of more than 2,000 military personnel from all branches of service. The participants included SEAL teams, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Operations Squadrons, Marine Corps units, and conventional forces from across the military. The complexity of the operation was staggering. The exercise scenario involved multiple simultaneous objectives that could only be achieved through precise coordination between different types of military units. Success would require not just tactical proficiency, but also seamless communication, shared situational awareness, and adaptive planning capabilities. Sarah had spent months preparing for this moment, working with commanders from every participating unit to ensure they understood their roles and responsibilities. She had conducted countless planning sessions, reviewed operational procedures, and refined coordination protocols. But she knew that no amount of preparation could guarantee success in an exercise of this complexity. The night before the exercise began, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the command center, reviewing final preparations and checking on the status of various systems and personnel. The facility was buzzing with activity as participants conducted last-minute preparations and coordinators ensured that all elements were ready for the morning's operations. As she made her rounds, Sarah was approached by Admiral Chun, who had arrived to observe the exercise personally. His presence was both reassuring and intimidating. Reassuring because she knew she had his support, but intimidating because she understood how much was riding on the exercise's success. "Captain," Admiral Chun said as they walked together through the command center, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens tomorrow, you've already achieved something remarkable. The fact that we're conducting an exercise of this scope and complexity is a testament to the quality of your work and your leadership. Sarah appreciated the encouragement, but she also knew that Admiral Chen's words carried an implicit message. Tomorrow's exercise would determine whether her integration concepts were truly viable or whether they would remain interesting theories that couldn't be implemented in practice. "Admiral," she replied, "I'm confident in the concepts and the personnel. We've done everything possible to prepare for success. Tomorrow will show whether we've been thinking about these challenges in the right way." The conversation was interrupted by a communications technician who needed Sarah's approval for final communications checks. As she turned to address the technical issue, Admiral Chen placed a hand on her shoulder. "Captain," he said quietly, "remember that great leaders are defined not by their ability to succeed when everything goes according to plan, but by their ability to adapt when things go wrong. Tomorrow will test both your concepts and your leadership. I have complete confidence in both." The exercise began at dawn with a complex scenario that simulated an emerging crisis requiring immediate military response. According to the scenario, hostile forces had captured critical infrastructure in a strategically important region, and conventional military approaches had proven insufficient to address the threat. Sarah's role was to coordinate a response that combined special operations capabilities with conventional military forces in ways that had never been attempted at such a scale. The operation would require simultaneous actions across multiple domains: land, sea, air, and cyber, with precise timing and flawless communication. From her position in the command center, Sarah could monitor every aspect of the operation through advanced communications and surveillance systems. Multiple screens displayed real-time information about the positions and status of all participating units, while communication channels provided constant updates from commanders across the operational area. The first phase of the exercise involved reconnaissance and intelligence gathering by special operations teams, whose information would guide the deployment of conventional forces. Sarah watched as SEAL teams conducted underwater approaches to simulated enemy positions, while Army Rangers established observation posts in mountainous terrain. The intelligence gathered during the initial phase was fed into a sophisticated analysis system that Sarah's team had developed as part of their integration concepts. The system processed information from multiple sources and provided commanders with a comprehensive picture of the operational environment. As the exercise progressed, Sarah found herself managing a complex web of communications and coordination requirements. She had to ensure that information was flowing effectively between different units, while maintaining operational security and avoiding the kind of confusion that could lead to friendly fire incidents or mission failure. The first major test came when one of the participating units encountered unexpected resistance and had to request immediate support. The scenario had been designed to test the integration concepts under stress, and Sarah knew that her response to this challenge would be closely scrutinized by the observing senior leaders. Using the coordination protocols her team had developed, Sarah quickly identified available support assets and coordinated their deployment to assist the unit in contact. The response required precise timing and careful coordination to avoid interference between different types of military units operating in the same area. The support operation was executed flawlessly, with special operations forces providing precise targeting information while conventional forces delivered the necessary firepower. The coordination was so smooth that the observing commanders barely noticed the complexity of what had been accomplished. As the exercise continued, Sarah found herself dealing with an increasing number of complications and challenges. Equipment failures, weather changes, and simulated enemy actions created a constantly evolving situation that tested every aspect of the integration concepts. Each challenge required Sarah to adapt her approach while maintaining overall coordination of the operation. She had to make rapid decisions based on incomplete information while considering the capabilities and limitations of the various units under her coordination. The most critical moment came during the final phase of the exercise, when multiple units had to coordinate simultaneous actions against heavily defended targets. The operation required split-second timing and perfect communication, with no margin for error. From the command center, Sarah could see that the operation was approaching its climax. Special operations teams were in position to neutralize key targets, while conventional forces prepared to secure the broader operational area. Air support was standing by to provide assistance if needed, and naval units were ready to prevent enemy reinforcement. All units, Sarah announced over the command network, this is exercise control. You are cleared to initiate final phase operations. Execute, execute, execute. What happened next validated years of planning and development. The various military units moved with precision and coordination that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Special operations teams eliminated their targets while conventional forces secured their objectives, all while maintaining perfect awareness of each other's positions and activities. The coordination was so effective that the exercise concluded 30 minutes ahead of schedule, with all objectives achieved and no simulated casualties among friendly forces. The level of integration between different types of military units was unprecedented in military exercises of this scale. As the exercise concluded, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Her integration concepts had been tested under the most demanding conditions possible, and they had performed exactly as designed. The years of planning and development had been validated in the most comprehensive way imaginable. The formal debriefing session took place that afternoon in a large conference room filled with senior officers from all branches of the military. Sarah was called upon to present her assessment of the exercise results and to discuss the implications for future military operations. As she stood before the assembled leaders, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. These were some of the most experienced and respected military professionals in the world, and their assessment of her work would influence the future direction of American military capabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, Operation Synthesis has demonstrated that special operations forces and conventional military units can be integrated in ways that create capabilities neither could achieve independently. The exercise results show that our integration concepts are not only theoretically sound, but also practically implementable. She went on to present detailed analysis of the exercise results, highlighting specific examples of successful coordination and discussing lessons learned that could inform future development efforts. Her presentation was thorough, professional, and compelling. When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment before General Hawkins, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, began to speak. Captain Mitchell, General Hawkins said, what we witnessed today represents a fundamental advancement in military capabilities. Your integration concepts have the potential to transform how we think about military operations, and your leadership during this exercise has been exemplary. The praise from General Hawkins was echoed by other senior leaders around the room. Admiral Patterson noted that the exercise had exceeded all expectations and recommended immediate implementation of the integration concepts across multiple commands. Admiral Chun, who had watched the entire exercise from the observation facility, approached Sarah as the debriefing session concluded. Captain, he said with evident satisfaction, you've achieved something truly remarkable. This exercise will be studied by military professionals for years to come, and your integration concepts will become standard practice across the military. But Admiral Chun wasn't finished. He pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation that would prove to be one of the most significant moments of her career. Sarah, he said, using her first name for the first time, there's something else we need to discuss. Your performance during this exercise has confirmed what many of us have believed for some time. You're ready for significantly greater responsibilities. He explained that senior military leadership had been watching her career closely, and that her success with the integration concepts had positioned her for opportunities that few officers ever receive. There's a promotion board meeting next week, Admiral Chun continued, and your name is going to be submitted for advancement to Rear Admiral. Based on your performance and the success of your programs, I believe you have excellent prospects for selection." The news was both thrilling and overwhelming. Sarah had always aspired to senior leadership positions, but the possibility of achieving flag rank had seemed like a distant goal. Now, at the age of 41, she was being considered for promotion to Admiral rank based on her innovative work and exceptional performance. "Admiral," she said, struggling to find appropriate words, "I'm honored by this opportunity. I hope to prove worthy of the confidence you and other senior leaders have placed in me." Admiral Chin smiled. "Sarah, you've already proven yourself. The question now is not whether you deserve this opportunity, but whether you're ready to take on the challenges that come with flag rank." Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her from a small farming community in Iowa to the threshold of Admiral rank in the United States Navy. She thought about the choices she had made, the challenges she had overcome, and the people who had supported her along the way. The promotion board results were announced 3 weeks later. Sarah was selected for advancement to Rear Admiral, becoming one of the youngest officers in recent history to achieve flag rank. The promotion was accompanied by assignment to a senior position within the Joint Staff, where she would have even greater influence on military planning and strategy. As she prepared for her new responsibilities, Sarah knew that her greatest challenges still lay ahead. Flag rank brought not just honor and recognition, but also tremendous responsibility for the lives and safety of the personnel under her command. But she also knew that she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Every difficult training exercise, every complex mission, and every challenging assignment had been building toward this opportunity to serve at the highest levels of military leadership. The little girl from Iowa who had decided to join the Navy on a recruiter's advice had become Rear Admiral Sarah Mitchell, one of the most respected leaders in American Special Operations. Her journey was far from over, but she had already achieved more than she had ever dared to dream possible. As she looked toward the future, Admiral Mitchell understood that her story was not just about personal achievement, but about the power of dedication, innovation, and leadership to transform both individual lives and entire institutions. She had proven that with enough determination and skill, even the most ambitious goals could be achieved. The SEAL Admiral who had once asked about her rank as a joke would never make that mistake again. When 3 generals had snapped to attention upon learning her true identity and accomplishments, they had been recognizing not just her rank, but the remarkable journey that had brought her to that moment of ultimate recognition and respect.